Hey, can you hear me? All right, very good. Tonight we're going to be discussing the resolution. People should not give money to beggars. And in order to understand the resolution, I just want to clarify a couple terms. I'm going to be interpreting this as a resolution of facts, meaning that it is either true or it is not true that you should give money to beggars. I'm going to obviously be arguing that it's not a good idea to give money to beggars. For our sakes, we're going to understand beggars as basically anyone asking for money in public. We're normally talking about homeless people who are panhandling in the modern sense of the word. So, in order to prove the resolution true, I'm going to be examining two contentions in favor of the resolution. We're going to start with the argument that they don't need your money, that beggars don't need your money, and then we're going to talk about how there are better alternatives other than money to give to them. So, let's start with how they don't need your money. The first argument under this contention is that panhandling can actually be a pretty lucrative way to spend your time. The Justice Department compiled a report in 2002 that analyzed the economics of panhandling, and they found that panhandling can get a beggar anywhere from just a few dollars a day on the very low end of the spectrum to up to $300 a day on the very high end of the spectrum. Now, the discrepancy depends on a lot of factors. For instance, how you look, whether or not you're disabled, if you're a veteran, if you're a woman with a child, or if you have a dog with you. Those are all factors that determine how much money you get. But I think what we need to keep in mind here is that even if they're getting a couple of dollars a day, they're doing nothing. They're sitting on the side of the road and they're getting money for free, which means it's actually a fairly lucrative thing to be engaged in. But the second reason that they don't need your money is that money enables addiction. So we're going to look at some evidence that talks about the link between substance abuse and homelessness or begging. The first is from the National Coalition from the Homeless in 2009. They compiled a report that found that 38% of homeless people are dependent on alcohol, and 26% of them abuse drugs. Similar findings were discovered by the University of Toronto in 2002 when they did a survey of beggars in Toronto, Canada, and they found that 93% of the beggars that they interviewed were tobacco users, 26% of them drank 7 days of the week, and 28% of them drank between 1 and 6 days of the week. So the problem is that homeless people and beggars are uniquely linked to substance abuse, and that by giving them your money, you're enabling them to go and use those substances which are not good for them. So the first argument is that they don't need your money. The second argument is that there are better alternatives than giving them money. So I want to help homeless people. I want to see them not be beggars. I want to see them have a good paying job. So here are some things you could give beggars that aren't money but help them. For instance, you could order them an Uber to get them to a homeless shelter. You give them a bag with, say, a granola bar and some personal hygiene products in it. You could give them personal care products like soap or shampoo, non-perishable food. You could give them jobs. That'd be a good thing to do. Or you could hook them up with a place called Tiny. There's a project called Tiny House LA, which builds homes for the homeless people. These kinds of things help them instead of money, which hurts them.
Okay. I like your arguments, but for example, you mentioned Uber buying all the stuff for them and saying that there's other alternatives to money. That is true, but here's the thing: not all those programs exist in every state. Not all of them exist in every city, and also not everyone can afford to get someone an Uber. Not everyone can afford to basically buy some certain stuff for certain people. And I'm thinking like sometimes like for like a guy like me, right? I'd say it sounds more convenient for me to just give a beggar, hey, here's like some 25 cents I got, right? Or here's a dollar. That's it, right? And basically, like if I had the money, yeah, like I'd probably say, hey, there's a better alternative than to give money. Like I probably would give them an Uber. I probably would buy them like a bunch of food or something, or try to find a shelter for them. But again, like sometimes people don't have the time of day. They don't have time to research all this stuff. They basically say, hey, you know what? There's some guy, he desperately needs money. Like I'll give him some cash, right? And basically, what we need to realize is that yes, there are people who abused their situation. They use this stuff for drugs and alcohol, and we cannot control that. And unfortunately, also we don't know like you don't know like the mind of each beggar. You don't know the situation of each person, because the problem is a lot of us, we are not in the shoes of that person. We don't know why they're there. We don't know if they are going to use their money for drugs. What if they're saving some money on the side, or if they're collecting? You don't know, because for example, imagine someone needs to go to a job interview. A beggar needs to go to a job interview, right? But that person cannot afford to get a bus pass or something. Like let's say you got like a couple cents, hey, here's a couple cents, right? That person has some money on the side, they saved up. Oh, cool, I got money for a bus pass. I can now go to that job interview that I wanted to. That person all of a sudden gets a good job, becomes a manager, maybe someday becomes rich, all because a good person like you and I gave that person some money. And so basically, I'd say there's nothing wrong with giving money. I mean, again, it could become a job, it could become a full-time job, but it's also a very risky job. Not everyone can do panhandling professionally. And again, it's not our moral right to basically make that call and make the assumption saying, hey, this person, like he's a professional panhandler. Well, sometimes you could tell by their clothes, by if they show up in a car or you see them driving away in a car, you're thinking, oh, look, this fake guy right here. But at the same time, again, that is a judgment call between you and the person. That is something between you and the other person. And again, and that's on their conscience. That's on your conscience. So again, I don't see anything wrong with giving money to beggars if, again, you hope that they will use it for good, for good use.
All right, so I'm gonna go down the flow and respond to your arguments. Let's start with the argument that services like Uber don't exist in every state, and then you went on to make the argument that it's just more convenient to just hand them money out of your car window. So first of all, I'm pretty sure Uber actually does exist in all 50 states, so that argument doesn't even apply. But assuming you can't get something in Uber, like Uber, for instance, to get them to a homeless shelter or a church or something of that sort, then call them a cab. There's a cab city in every major city in this country. But I'd also like to point out that plastic bags and soap and granola bars also exist in every state. So instead of reaching in your wallet and handing some cash out of the window, why don't you take 20 minutes out of your day to go to Walmart and buy some plastic bags and some bars of soap and some granola bars and put those in a Ziploc bag and keep them in the door of your car. And if a homeless person or a beggar is trying to panhandle, roll down your car window and hand them a plastic bag filled with stuff that can make their lives better instead of cash, which they'll use to hurt themselves. Argument where you said that it's just more convenient to give them money, right? I don't have time to order them an Uber. I don't have time to do all this other stuff. If your justification for giving beggars money is it's just more convenient for me, then I would argue that you really only care about yourself. Your calculus there is not what is going to help this person who's actually in need. The calculus is what's good for me, right? And so that's a pretty selfish way to think about this. But it's also selfish in the second response that it actually hurts them, because I gave you all these stats in my first speech that says that these people disproportionately have used alcohol and drugs. I doubt that the majority of homeless people are going to take the $5 you give them and go buy a suit jacket from Goodwill so they can go to a job interview. They're probably going to go down to the gas station and buy a Natty Ice. Right? So you don't want to give them money because they're more than likely going to go either abuse a substance that is legal but destructive or abuse an illegal substance that's also destructive. So we have to think about what's good for them, and what's good for them, obviously, is to not give them money. Now, your last argument was you don't know the situation of each individual beggar. You gave the example, for instance, how they might need to go get a job interview. I totally agree that that is a thing that actually happens. So here are my responses. The first is that any church in any major city would happily give a beggar clothes for a job interview. No problem. Any church. Doesn't matter what denomination, what sect of Christianity you come from. You could go to any church in any city. I guarantee you they would go out of their way to hook up a beggar with some slacks and a sport coat so he could go interview for a job. Need to give them money because there are all these services that exist to help them. The second response is that every major city has programs to help beggars. My town, Nashville, has this phenomenal program called the Nashville Rescue Mission, and it's run by hundreds of Christians and who want to help homeless people, and they work through a program. And so when the homeless people finish the program in 6 months, they have a job and don't need to beg anymore. So again, the calculus needs to be, who is this best for? Is it best for me? Is it best for the beggar? Yeah, it's easy to hand out cash out of your window, but in all likelihood, what you're doing is you're enabling them to live a destructive lifestyle when you should go a little bit out of the way to help change their life.
Okay, so basically, I like to respond to the Uber thing. I was implying Uber, after Uber, something about LA housing, something like that. Yeah, I was basically responding, talking about that. Like Uber, yeah, of course, exists in all 50 states. But either way, and then you also said that if I don't have time of day, I'm being selfish and I don't care more about myself than that person. Not really, because at the same time, again, the reason why I rather prefer just say, hey, if I got a couple cents, I'd rather give that to them. Because at the same time, again, I'm not some rich millionaire who has all this time and money to spend on the person. If I actually had more, if I had more money and if I had more time in my life, if I was more financially free as a human being, then yes, more to the person, I would actually do the whole Uber thing. And that's basically my response to that. Now, also, you talk about churches. Well, remember, not all churches are the same in this country. I mean, for example, you got some really conservative churches who might actually look down upon beggars and be like, hey, guys, why don't you go get a job? And again, also, speaking of churches, you mentioned how churches are also nice and give out clothes. Well, let me remind you that also not giving to beggars is basically a violation of religious rules for a lot of religious people. For example, in Christianity and in Islam and in Judaism, right? Basically, if you're not giving to the poor, you're actually angering God. For example, like in Islam, they don't have the Ten Commandments. They got like the pillars of Islam, and basically, giving money to the poor is basically the third pillar of Islam. Basically, if someone's begging for money, you're doing a good thing. You're actually, it's called the zakat, something like that. But basically, in the third pillar of Islam, you have to like give money to the poor if you have it, of course. If you have the money, give it to someone who needs it. And then, for example, in Christianity and Judaism, Proverbs 14:31 says like this. Basically, I'm sorry, I don't have it up right now, but basically, here's the thing: in Christianity and in Islam and Judaism, you have to give money to the poor because again, you're praising God that way. If not, you're going against God's word. Which, for example, like excuse me, right. So, for example, in Proverbs 14:31, he that oppresses the poor shows contempt for his maker, the creator, but he that honors him is kind to the needy. Basically, if you're being mean to the poor, like if you're not helping them, you're actually insulting God. You're insulting the creator, but you're praising God by giving money to the poor. So from a religious argument, I would say basically, again, religious people give out money to the poor because, again, it's part of their religious, let's say, rites or rituals. For example, I, as a Christian, I have this guilty conscience and say, I know that as a Christian, I must understand the person's situation because maybe I'll be in that situation someday. So here's some money for them to help them out.
All right. So let's look at your arguments individually. So your first argument was that you just basically don't have time or money to give homeless people stuff. So it's just easier, again, to hand money out the window. So if you really just are not financially free enough to give anything to homeless people, then don't give them anything. That would be the simpler response. That it would be better to give them nothing than to just give them cash, which then they can use to fuel their drug or their alcohol addiction. So I would argue just be better to give them nothing. But the second response is anyone can give them a bar of soap. I can go to Walmart and buy a 50 pack of soap for like what, $4 or $5? Anyone can spare $4 or $5 to buy soap, and then another $4 or $5 to buy some granola bars. And then you put those in a plastic bag and you hand them out your window. That is not financially inhibiting for anyone, especially anyone in America, because we're such a wealthy country. So look, if you don't have the money, it would be better to just not give them money. But if you have $10 to spare, it would be much better to give them a granola bar and a bar of soap than it would be to give them cash, which they can use to hurt themselves. Now, in response to my argument about churches, you said that conservative churches are going to look down on homeless people. I just like to point out that this is a remarkably ignorant statement. I go to not only an extremely wealthy, but also an extremely conservative church in my hometown. We donate a crap load of money specifically to ministries that help homeless people in my city. The rescue mission is supported by my church. And what we do as wealthy conservative Christians is we give money to organizations like the National Rescue Mission so they in turn can provide jobs and futures for homeless people. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. We don't just go around handing out cash to homeless people because we understand how irresponsible and potentially destructive that is. What we do is we give them jobs, we give them training, and we give them food, and we give them shelter. Those are all really, really good things that aren't going to hurt them. Now, your last argument was a theological one, where you cited Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and said that all three of those religions require you to give to the poor. That's correct. What you're citing is a theological concept called alms. And in all three of those religious traditions, alms do not equate to money. 100% of the time doesn't mean that if you are required to give alms to the poor, that does not mean you have to give them cash. That means you have to give something. So, for instance, in Christianity, I'm supposed to give 10% of my income to the church. I give that money to the church, and the church then goes and does a whole bunch of stuff with it. One of those things is we help poor people out. And if poor people can demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that they are money, my church will give them money. 9 times out of 10, we'll also give them food and housing, right? And historically, in Islam, for instance, alms were determined not in monetary terms, but in terms of like how much food you could give to help the poor. Same thing with Judaism. Alms were given in cattle, for instance, or in sheep or in wool. This wasn't currency. These were goods you were giving to assist the poor. You weren't just giving them money. So historically speaking, that argument.
All right, I'd like to respond to part about like how I said now conservative churches, not all, again, not all of them are the same. Like and I didn't say all conservative churches, because again, I myself am a conservative Christian, but there are some conservative churches that are like that. You'd be surprised at how many of those exist. Now, they basically, for example, like I would also argue from, let's say, a capitalistic perspective, it's a good way for someone to make money and to get off the streets. Because, for example, I remember when I was, for example, at a rally, and there's a guy. He said, "Hey, Democrats right here, Republicans right here." People told him, "Hey, go get a real job and everything." From a capitalist perspective, I'm like, "Hey, this guy's, he's onto something. He found a way how to make money. He found himself a job." Now, again, like, of course, I would not promote this as a full-time job, because obviously, like, it's not honorable, and basically, I don't know, like, if anyone wants to live like that forever. But I'd say this, I'd say that it's a good thing, because he could use that money to get off the streets. For example, you're saying, give some clothes and all this other soaps and all this other stuff, right? For example, like, okay, you help them with some clothes, you help them with this, but you're still not really getting them off the streets. They need money to get off the streets. And that is why, it's better sons give money. And for example, like, again, like, if people like don't have time today, just, so what if they give some money? Like, that is fine. Like, basically, again, you don't know if the person is going to use it for good stuff or bad stuff. That is up for, not for us to decide. And again, like, again, from a theological perspective, like, again, it is, you could, like, give alms, right? But then again, if you want to use money, it could be money. I mean, it's not a sin in a Christianity. And like, I'd argue from a capitalist perspective, it's a good way to get someone off the streets, because, like, again, like, you don't know what the person's situation, you don't know how they got on the streets, you don't know if they're trying to get off the streets or not. Again, that is a judgment call you make between yourself and that individual. Right, I'll pass them back to you.
All right. So I really only heard one argument from you in the last speech, and that was that, in essence, homeless people just need money to get off the streets, and that you should just give them money because you don't really know what they're going to do with it. You can't make that judgment call. So first of all, we have to understand that the thing that has been empirically proven in this debate round is that homeless people are disproportionately likely to use dangerous substances. I cited a study from the University of Toronto. 93% of homeless people they surveyed used tobacco. 38% of them were dependent on alcohol, and 26% of them abused drugs. So that is empirical data that says that homeless people are disproportionately likely to abuse addictive substances. So that means use the money I'm giving them to hurt themselves than to help themselves. So that right there indicates to me that because they're going to hurt themselves. The question is, what actually helps them? What you haven't demonstrated is that giving counterintuitive. Understand that what is the link between giving homeless people money, people getting off the streets, or giving beggars money? And there's no empirical link there. There's no data that says that when you give them money, they get off the streets. However, one thing that is really, really good at getting homeless people off the streets are church ministries and other nonprofits that specialize in helping homeless people. They're incredibly good at getting homeless people off the streets. And again, I'll bring this back to my church and the ministry that we sponsor called the Nashville Rescue Mission. We're really, really good off the streets, because what we do is we find them, we bring them into the mission, we give them food, we give them clothes, we give them shelter, we teach them about, because I'm Christian, we teach them about the Bible, and then we teach them skills. We teach them, for instance, how to become professional chefs. And then there's a restaurant in Nashville that partners with the Nashville Rescue Mission, and it's a restaurant that's completely staffed and run by homeless people. And those homeless people went through the mission over a 6 responsible adults. They learn how to become chefs, and now they're members having, with a salary, with a home, with a place to live. Some of them are starting families. That is empirical data that says that churches are able to get homeless people off the streets. And note, we never give them money. We give them alms. We give them things to help them: food, shelter, jobs, education, and teaching. That gets homeless people off the street. Handing them money isn't guaranteed to do that. But I can show you empirically that more than likely that money is going to go into a pack of cigarettes or another gram of heroin. Sport coat for a job interview, no matter how much you like to believe that.
All right, that's me. Yeah. So basically, for example, you're talking about your church and your church only. Like, and basically, for example, um, some some folks, they just like living in homeless shelter. They don't want to move on beyond that. For example, like you said, like if I give money to someone, they'll use the money for cigarettes or heroin or for other useless stuff, right? And basically, like, but then at the same time, you got people who be addicted to the homeless shelter. You got people who be addicted to the free stuff, like not the money, but just free stuff. And then again, it doesn't matter. Again, what you give to a homeless man doesn't matter if it's money or some free stuff. But regardless, like a lot of homeless people, like you don't know if they'll like want to improve their life or not. But again, if you have a conscience, like if you feel that you have a conscience and you're like saying, no, how else can I help them? Like, and if you got money, give them the money. Like if you think like money's not gonna help, well, that's up to you. But personally, for example, I believe that a homeless person that like you could improve their life if you give them some money, and then, for example, let them get their own cab. Let them get their own bus pass and everything. Again, that's if you. But if you have more money, give them more. You know. So, for example, money will not hurt them. Especially, let's say if you're a really rich person, right? You give them $100. Believe me, you don't know what that $100 could do for that person. And for example, also, like a lot of homeless people, they waste their money not on cigarettes, not on drugs, like you said, like which is very stereotypical. But also at the same time, a lot of homeless people waste their money on, say, lottery tickets. I mean, I know like it's 1 in a million, but like you've got all these folks, for example, who like become lucky and then win. You don't know what money can do. Like money could actually improve someone's lifestyle in the future. Right, and I'm passing on the mic to you.
Okay, so your first argument was that some people just like being homeless, and I actually agree with you that that is a real phenomenon that exists. So ironically, if people just like being homeless, they like sitting around and doing nothing and sleeping under bridges, then by giving them money, you are training them that being lazy and accomplishing nothing and contributing nothing to society is actually good, and that they deserve money for that. So what you're doing is you're actually reinforcing a negative behavior because these people don't do anything. They sit around by the side of the road and beg for money. So as you give them money, they're doing is good and valuable, and that's really bad. Your second argument, contrast, if you give them free stuff like what I'm talking about, shelter, food, training, that kind of thing, that people get addicted to free stuff. Okay, this argument is absurd. It's really hard to get addicted to soap and granola bars. It's really easy to get addicted to free money. So I don't think you're going to have a homeless guy showing up on the same street corner every day. Hope conservative Christian's going to come by and hand him a bar of soap because he really just got hooked on. But he is going to use the same corner every day if he gets you're reinforcing bad behavior. Now, your last argument was this kind of appeal to emotion thing. If you have a conscience, you should just want to help homeless people. If you have a conscience, money is the last thing you should give homeless people because more than likely, and again, according to real data, they're going to spend that money on cigarettes, they're going to spend it on heroin, cocaine, marijuana, something like that. You even mentioned they're going to spend it on lottery tickets. Lottery tickets are called the poor tax for a reason. It's because for some reason, poor people have deluded themselves into thinking that if they buy lottery tickets, they're going to win the lottery. So empirically, they're going to throw that money away. So the second versus feelings. My facts say that homeless people use money to abuse substances and generally speaking accomplish nothing. Your feelings say that, well, we should just give them money out of compassion. No, that is the last thing you should give them. You should give them something that is going to help them, like shelter, like a job, like food, like personal care products. You should give them a legitimate path to get out of their situation instead of giving them a medium which will enable them to continue their addictive habits.
All right. Thing again, like I said, not everyone is capable of doing that. So, for example, like you just said, how people just get addicted to money and they just sit around on their butt doing nothing. Well, again, at the same time, they could get addicted to just getting granola bars. They could get addicted to just getting free stuff. Again, like it's very tempting for people to live on welfare. For example, you got people who are not homeless, but they live on welfare, right? They're not beggars, but they live on welfare because they don't go beyond that. And so at the same time, you've got a lot of homeless people who will also get your free stuff that you give them. You're not saying, oh, I'm not giving them any money, so they won't use it on useless things, right? So I'll give them some granola bar, okay, right? And they'll just get used to that. They'll expect that kind of stuff more often. So again, it doesn't matter. So like technically, like there's nothing wrong if you give them some money to try to improve their lifestyle. Right. Okay.
Okay, so again, the only argument you're left with is this absurd claim that people will become addicted to my Ziploc bag with directions to the nearest homeless shelter and a granola bar and a bar of soap. No, people will not get addicted to that. That is insane. Um, that defies all cognitive reason. What I've shown you with empirical data is that homeless people like using drugs, and they like using the money that they get to use those drugs. And while I personally think they have every right in the world to use those drugs, it is empirically true that drugs destroy your life. And so I don't want to give them money, which is going to enable them to hurt themselves even more. I want to give them an avenue to help them. I want to get them to a church. I want to get them to a homeless shelter. I want to give them an opportunity to clean themselves, to put some good, nourishing food in their bodies. I want to give them an opportunity to start a path towards a life that's going to be better for them. I don't want them to use money to get money so they can blow it on cigarettes or lottery tickets or drugs, because those things are not going to help them. So this again, this addicted to the homelessness, addicted to the free stuff, addicted to the lifestyle, that is exacerbated. It's made worse by your position giving them money. It is only helped by my position. What you want to do is you want to give these people a way to live a better life, not give them a way to continue their problems.
At the same time, again, for example, like people can still get addicted to homelessness. Okay, and even with the way your church runs and the way your organization runs, people can still get addicted to that and stay that way, stay the way they are. And for example, at the same time, so for example, I give money, like again, that is on me, and that is on you, whether you decide to ignore them or not. Like basically, the money could help them become better or worse. You don't know that. I don't know that. We don't know that. We cannot just make that judgment call and make the assumption saying, hey, well, he's going to use the money on drugs, like why don't I just try to help him out with something else? Well, okay, you could, right? But then again, like when you give some money, you can't assume that. Again, and money does help people get out of bad situations. It really does. For example, you have to actually live in those shoes to actually understand what's truly going on in their minds. And again, people could get addicted, especially to homelessness, especially in the homeless shelters. We have lots of homeless people here in the Phoenix area, and like you see, like people just stay, like people get the free stuff from organizations that do the same stuff that you do, and guess what? The result is the same. Many of them still remain where they were, and right, and regardless whether you give them money or basically do what you're doing, right? Some of them just stay the same. So again, like so if I give them money, yeah, that is on me. That is just I hope that this person is going to be saying, hey, you know what, this guy gave me some money. I'll be smart and I'll save it, or like I'll be smart, buy some food and stuff, some drugs. And a lot of times people do prefer to get food